Hope, Celeste had learned, was not a warm thing. It was a blade she kept swallowing because the alternative was to lie down and let men decide what her life was worth. Pax called that obedience. Priests called it purity. Elders called it order. She had called it home until home turned its face away and named her cursed for surviving when better wolves had died. By dawn, she understood a harder truth. Belonging could be revoked in a single vote, but duty could not. Duty had a heartbeat. Duty pressed beneath her palm as she crossed the Ashford boundary with mud on her boots, blood stiffening her cloak, and one hand guarding the small curve of her belly. The eastern tree line glowed bruised purple where night was giving up. Cold wind scraped across the ridge, carrying pine sap, wet earth, and distant smoke from morning cook fires inside the Packhouse compound below. Her knees shook with every step down the slope, not from fear alone. She had run through half the night with a split lip, torn hem, and the taste of ash lodged at the back of her throat. The blood on her cloak was not fresh, and not all of it was hers. At the gate she stopped, lifted both hands so they could see she carried no blade, and forced her voice to hold. "I am Celeste Frostborn," she said, "widow of Rowan Frostborn of North Hollow. I request sanctuary under moon law until winter convocation." Two guards in Ashford Grey stared at her as if she had arrived wrapped in plague cloth. One was young enough that his beard still came in uneven. The older one had a scar crossing his nose, and a silver torque at his throat marking council service. Neither moved to open. The older guard spat into the dirt. "Read the order." The younger guard unrolled a waxed strip from his belt and read too quickly, like someone reciting bad scripture he had been warned not to question. Celeste Frostborn, identified carrier of blood blight, tied to forbidden Queen Line agitation, under interdiction by Joint Council Authority, detain, isolate, transfer to sanctified custody at moonrise. Blight carrier. The word struck harder than the wind. "That is forged," Celeste said. "Who sealed it?" "Enough," the older guard snapped. "On your knees." "I came to surrender for lawful review. You have to call your alpha or your healer or any ranking witness. That is covenant law." His smile did not reach his eyes. Covenant law does not protect contamination. She did not kneel. She tightened her fingers over her belly and breathed once, careful and deep. "At least bring me water." The younger guard glanced at her wrist, where dried blood had cracked in dark lines over old scar tissue. Doubt flickered. It lasted one heartbeat. Then boots sounded behind the gate, and three more soldiers came through with chain loops in their hands, eyes hard, jaws set in the same rigid line. Somewhere inside the compound, a bell rang for first meal. The ordinary sound made everything feel unreal. They circled her. She backed one step, then another, until her heel struck the lower stone of the gate arch. She could have shifted if panic took her cleanly, but panic never arrived clean. It came tangled with nausea, grief, exhaustion, and the stubborn command beating inside her chest. Stay upright, protect the child, live long enough to tell the truth. "I am not resisting," she said. "Good," said the older guard. "Then this is easy." Iron closed on her wrists. The chain was old, pitted, and colder than river ice. When they pulled, lynx bit skin already raw from rope burns. She hissed through her teeth but kept her shoulders square. Humiliation moved through her like fever as they marched her across the packed yard while apprentices and kitchen workers paused to stare. No one spoke to her. No one looked away. The trapdoor was hidden beneath stacked wood in a side corridor of the old packhouse. The boards above it smelled of mold and mouse droppings. One soldier kicked the latch, hauled the door up, and sour, damp air rose from the dark below. "What is this?" Celeste asked. "Punishment cell," said the younger guard, voice thin. "Temporary." She turned her head toward him. "Temporary until what?" Until moonrise transfer. The older guard answered for him. If the Ashen Veil takes you, at least they'll know what to do with your kind. Her stomach rolled. She had heard of the Ashen Veil in whispers spoken near stables and extinguished fires, always followed by silence too fast to be natural. Purity cult, consecrated salt, testimony extracted by prayer and pain until it sounded like consent. I am carrying a child, she said, each word clipped. You will not drop me down there. The older guard leaned close enough that she smelled stale ale on his breath. Then climb carefully. They lowered her by chain at first, boots scraping rough stone, then let go the last 3 feet. She landed badly, one knee slamming dirt, shoulder clipping wall. Dust burst up and filled her mouth with old lime and rot. Above, the square of light shrank as they dragged the door closed. Darkness swallowed her whole. For a long time she knelt where she had fallen and listened. Drips. A rat shifting behind loose brick. The distant groan of beams settling. Then the corridor sounds resumed overhead. Boots, voices, a heavy thing being dragged. Her wrists throbbed. She maneuvered onto the low pallet bolted to the wall and sat, chain fixed to an iron ring at floor level. When her breathing finally slowed, she pressed both palms over her belly and counted heartbeats until the tightness under her ribs eased. I will not break here, she thought. Not in this hole. Not before you are born. By mid-morning, light leaked through seams in the floorboards in thin, dirty bars, enough to see the cell's corners, a cracked basin, rust stains, chalk marks carved into stone where other prisoners had counted days. Someone had scratched a phrase near the ring bolt in jagged script. They believe the lie if enough men repeat it. Celeste traced the letters with her eyes and tasted bitterness. 3 days earlier, North Hollow had still stood, and Rowan had still laughed with his hand spread over hers at supper, thumb absently tapping a rhythm on the table whenever he was planning. He had been patient where she was sharp, quiet where she burned, and fierce in exactly the moments that required it. At dusk that night, a runner arrived with a council summons sealed in black wax. By moonrise, men she had known since childhood were arguing in their own hall that she should be examined for contamination. Rowan stood and called them cowards. Steel flashed. She remembered the sound first, not the sight. A chair overturning, someone shouting her name, the crack of ceremonial blades against stone. She remembered Rowan staggering, blood blooming through his shirt, and still trying to reach her as 2 council wolves pinned her arms behind her back. Not all deaths were loud. His had ended in one shuddering breath against her fingers. She had not screamed then. She screamed now, silently, jaw clenched so tight pain shot into her temples. The breaking point had come less than an hour later, when Elder Varick entered the storage room where they had locked her and laid a parchment on the crate beside her. She is carrying, he said to the 2 sentries, as if she were livestock. Wulfric Ravencrest offers terms. Celeste went still. What terms? Varick did not look at her. Safe transfer, cleansing, public mercy if you confess willingly. Confess what? He finally met her gaze, and there had been no shame in him. That Rowan sold you to the Vale before his death. That he knew your line was unstable. That North Hollow acted in self-defense. She stared, waiting for the joke. None came. You want me to stain his name so you can bargain with butchers. We want peace, he said, and we want to survive the winter without Ravencrest's sanctions. Sign. And this ends quickly. She remembered tasting blood where she bit the inside of her cheek to stop shaking. You watched him die. I watched him choose wrong. When she refused, they bound her ankles, left her without water, and posted 2 guards outside the door. Through the slats, she heard them discussing price lists for grain tariffs as if nothing irreversible had happened. Somewhere between those practical voices, something in her settled with terrible clarity. If she stayed, She would be delivered before dawn. If she signed, Rowan would be erased and her child branded cursed before first breath. If she ran, she might die on the road, but the truth would still be hers to carry. She waited until the second watch changed, and the new guard came limping, favoring his left leg from an old hunt injury she remembered from spring. She called softly through the wood, "Please, water." He opened the hatch at shoulder height, muttering, "You people are all the same." Begging when it turns. She jammed her bound wrists through the gap, yanked hard, and drove her shoulder into the door in the same motion. Surprise did the rest. He stumbled, keys clattered. She kicked his knee, grabbed the ring, and tore free one ankle loop on a splintered hinge. The second sentry lunged, caught her braid, and she felt hair rip from scalp as she twisted away. Pain flared white. She slammed the keyring against his mouth, heard him curse, and ran. She ran barefoot for the first mile, shoes lost in mud when she cut across the lower marsh to avoid the west trail. Reeds sliced her calves. Frost water soaked her skirt to the hip. Behind her, horns sounded once, then twice. She kept moving. At a cattle bridge, she stole a cloak from a fence post and a knife from a feed shed, then hid in a dry culvert until patrol scents passed overhead. By the time night thinned toward dawn, her throat burned raw from cold air, and she could no longer feel 2 fingers on her left hand. 3 days passed before she saw the Ashford boundary stones rise between fir roots like old teeth. She had chosen Ashford because their laws were strict, their healers were said to be practical, and Marcus Ashford's pack had refused Vale missionaries twice in one winter. She had repeated those facts in her mind through every mile like prayer beads. Facts were better than hope. Facts did not betray. Now, in the dark under their floor, those facts felt childish. Above her, voices swelled near the trapdoor. At least 4 men. 1 woman, clipped consonants, council-trained. "Moonrise transfer stands," a man said. Ravencrest sent a sealed request. She requested sanctuary. The woman answered, "If we break moon law publicly, neighboring packs will challenge jurisdiction. Then we process quietly. No witnesses. She's pregnant. Which is why this must be contained." Celeste rose, chain-scraping stone, and stepped under the brightest seam of light. "I can hear you," she called. "If you have charges, bring them to my face." Silence dropped heavy and immediate. Then another voice, deeper, edged with restrained fury she had not heard before. "Who ordered a prisoner beneath the old boards?" No one answered quickly enough. Boots crossed overhead, fast and hard. Timber groaned. Someone barked, "Stand down, soldier." The deep voice came again, closer now. "Open it. Not your rank to demand." A crack split the floor above her, sudden as lightning striking pine. Dust rained into her hair. Celeste stumbled back, arms shielding her head. Wood screamed, nails shrieked from beams. A second impact hit, then a third, each one a violent shock through the cell walls. Light speared down in widening blades as planks tore apart. When the final board ripped free, dawn poured in around the silhouette of a broad-shouldered soldier crouched at the edge of the hole, chest heaving, hands full of splintered wood, eyes burning amber as banked coals brought to wind. He held her gaze for one suspended beat, then swung his legs over the jagged edge and dropped into the cell as if the fall were nothing. Boots landing in the dirt with a force that shuddered through the chainring at her feet. Up close, he looked less like a guard and more like a storm forced into human shape. Tall enough that the low ceiling made him bow his head, shoulders filling the narrow space, forearms streaked with splinters where he had torn through nailed planks bare-handed. The insignia on his sleeve marked him as a mid-rank soldier, but authority rolled off him in a way cloth could not fake. Above them, faces crowded the broken opening. Council gray, kitchen aprons. 2 guards she recognized from the gate, suddenly pale. "Step away from the prisoner," the older guard barked, voice cracking on the second word. The soldier did not look up. Name. The command hit Celeste harder than his entrance had. No contempt, no accusation, just a demand for truth. Celeste Frostborn, she said, throat rough. I requested sanctuary at dawn. His jaw flexed once and she caught the scent of cedar smoke and cold iron beneath the cell's damp rot. Predator scent? Pack command. Not ordinary. A woman's voice snapped from above, clipped and legal. That woman is under interdiction pending transfer. You are out of line, soldier. He finally glanced up, and in that angle of light his irises shifted, amber deepening toward molten metal. Interdiction by whose seal? Joint Council, North Hollow and Ravencrest. The woman stepped into view at the broken edge, silver braid tight at her nape, scroll case clutched to her chest. Stand aside. His mouth curved without humor. You placed a pregnant sanctuary claimant in a punishment pit and cited Ravencrest as authority. If this reaches the Eastern Alliances, they will gut your jurisdiction in open challenge. No one answered. Dust drifted between them like ash. Celeste stayed where she was, chain taut from her wrist to the floor ring, pulse hammering. She had crossed half a region to reach this compound because Ashford was supposed to be bound by law even when mercy failed. Hearing one soldier name the same law did not calm her. It made room for a different fear, older and sharper. That hope was opening its teeth again. The young guard at the gate leaned over the hole and blurted. Orders came at first bell from Council Chamber 3. We were told she carried blight. We were told not to let her near the healer wing. The woman rounded on him. You were told to obey command. The soldier in the cell looked back to Celeste. His voice lowered, rough at the edges. Can you stand without falling? I have been standing since Rowan was killed, she said, then hated the tremor that followed. Something passed over his face, quick and unreadable. Not pity. Anger, contained with effort. He crouched by her wrist chain. I am going to break this. Keep your hand clear. Celeste took one involuntary step back. Iron had been put on her by men who smiled and spoke softly first. He tracked the movement and stilled, palms open, a fighter showing empty hands in a space too small for lies. I will not drag you, he said. I will get you out if you permit it. Above, the older guard shouted, Do not touch her. Transfer team is due by moonrise. The soldier's head lifted just enough for his voice to carry. Then moonrise can find an empty pit. He braced one hand around the ring bolt set in stone and the other around the chain link nearest her wrist. Muscles bunched through torn sleeve and scarred skin. Metal screamed. The bolt tore out of the floor with a spray of grit. A few people above flinched back from the sound. The woman with the braid recovered first. You are finished in this pack. At that, he gave a short laugh that held no amusement at all. That depends who is finishing whom. He rose and extended his hand to Celeste, palm up. Dirt marked his knuckles. A thin cut crossed the heel of his thumb where wood had split his skin. He waited. She stared at his hand as if it were a verdict. In the space behind her ribs, instinct sharpened to a blade point, not warning her away, but pressing, insistent, toward him. Her wolf did not cower. The animal part of her went rigid with attention. If this was another trap, it was elegantly built. If it was not, she had one chance before they found another chain. She set her fingers in his. The world narrowed to skin contact. Heat surged up her arm in a bright, violent line, not like fever, not like fear, but like silver fire finding an old path beneath bone. It struck her chest, split there, and dropped low, fierce and protective, settling over the child with terrifying precision. Her knees buckled. He caught her elbow instantly, grip firm and careful, and she felt the same current leap through him. He inhaled hard, a sharp, involuntary sound. His pupils blew wide. Amber flooded his irises until something ancient looked out through his eyes. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then voices crashed back in from above, louder now, panicked. What did he do? Get command down here now. Seal the corridor. Celeste's hand was still in his. She tried to pull back and could not make herself do it. Grief for Rowan rose like a wound reopening, immediate and savage, because this pull was not memory and not betrayal either. It was new, sacred, wrong in its timing and undeniable in its force. Her body knew before her mind accepted anything at all. The soldier's gaze dropped, stunned, to where her free palm covered the curve of her belly. His expression changed from shock to something rawer, almost reverent, then sharpened into battle readiness in a blink as boots thundered toward the corridor outside. In the span of a dozen breaths, the old quiet of the cell was gone forever. He stepped closer, placing himself between her and the wall where a crossbow bolt could enter from above. "Look at me," he said. She did, his voice thinned to a whisper too private for the crowd overhead. Celeste. Hearing her name from him felt like a door she had never seen opening inside her chest. "How do you know me?" she asked. His jaw tightened as if he were fighting two wars at once. "I do not know how I know. I only know I have crossed 3 winters feeling hunted by an absence, and it ended when I touched you." The confession landed between them, dangerous and plain. A chain ladder dropped through the opening. 2 armed soldiers started down, then hesitated when he turned his head. Power rolled off him, sudden and immense, compressing the air until the men's hands shook on the rungs. One lost footing and scrambled back up, cursing under his breath. The woman with the braid snapped, "By counsel right, stand down, that is an order." He faced upward now, still keeping Celeste bracketed behind his shoulder. "Counsel right does not overrule moon law." She claimed sanctuary. You denied process. You forged urgency around a cult request. We did not forge anything. Then produce the wax seal and witness marks in full light. Now. Silence answered him, dense with calculation. Celeste watched his profile and understood 2 things with equal clarity. He was not merely a disobedient soldier, and the people above were suddenly very careful around him. The older gate guard tried bluster and failed. "Who are you to challenge chamber authority?" The question hung. The soldier looked back at Celeste first, as if asking something without words, then lifted his chin toward the opening. "The one who will answer for what happens next." He bent, hooked one arm behind her knees and the other around her back, and lifted her before she could argue. She made a startled sound, more anger than fear. "Put me down, I can climb." "I do not doubt it," he said. "I will not risk a fall." The chain still cuffed one wrist, links dangling, and she gripped his shoulder to steady herself as he stepped onto the first rung of the ladder. Heat from his body bled through her torn sleeve. Each movement sent another pulse through the bond, low and humming, tightening then easing like a second heartbeat aligned to hers. Halfway up, the crowd at the top shifted back in a ring, making room without being asked. The woman with the braid stood rigid near the broken boards, face drained of color now that she saw him in full light. Unease rippled outward in widening waves. No one spoke his name. He stepped onto the corridor planks with Celeste still in his arms. The packhouse smelled of cooked barley, lamp oil, wet wool, and fear. Dawn light slanted through high windows, striping dust and stunned faces. People in that hallway moved aside in a hush, watching him and pretending not to. When the braided counselor spoke, her voice had lost its earlier steel. "Soldier, we were told your unit was at the southern border." "I was," he said. "Then someone buried my mate under this floor." The words struck the corridor like thrown glass. Celeste froze against him. Mate. She should have rejected it on instinct, on loyalty, on sheer self-preservation. Instead, that low thrum in her chest answered as if it had been waiting for language, Her pulse climbed so hard she felt it in her throat. Desire and dread tangled until she could not separate them, and beneath both, a fierce, bewildering rightness kept rising. He seemed to hear it too. His gaze found hers again, and the hall, the council, the broken planks, all of it blurred at the edges. There was only the locked line between their eyes and the truth moving through it, non-trivial and absolute. Whatever came next would demand everything from both of them. Behind the counselor, a runner skidded into the corridor carrying a sealed scroll stamped in black wax. Ravencrest's mark glinted in the morning light. The amber-eyed soldier bared his teeth in a smile that promised war, then shifted Celeste higher against his chest and walked straight toward the council chamber doors. He drove his shoulder into the council chamber doors and sent them inward on a hard swing, not theatrical, just decisive, the kind of movement that ended debate before words began. Polished stone threw back the morning light in cold bands. 12 council seats curved around a central table carved with Ashford law marks, and every face at that table shifted from irritation to alarm when they saw who carried Celeste and what still hung from her cuffed wrist. The braided counselor reached the center first, scroll lifted like a shield. "Put her down and return to your post." He set Celeste on her feet with care, one hand steady at her elbow until she found balance. Then he took the black wax scroll from the runner without asking, snapped the seal, and scanned the lines. The muscles in his jaw tightened. "Forgery layered over extortion," he said. "Ravencrest cites convocation authority that does not begin until first snow. He cites your signatures as prior assent." His gaze cut across the table. "Who gave him those signatures?" No one answered. Celeste felt the room leaning toward violence in tiny increments. Hands flattening on stone, shoulders angling, guards selecting sides with their feet. Her wrists throbbed where iron had chewed skin raw. The bond between her and the soldier burned low and constant, unnerving because it did not fade when she willed it to. A senior elder with ash-white hair spoke without looking at her. "The claimant will be isolated pending purity examination." "She has already been isolated," the soldier said. "In a punishment pit, in violation of sanctuary code. You are overstepping." "I am correcting." The elder's mouth thinned. "Your concern is noted, soldier. Leave." He did not move. "Call healer Tamsin. Bring neutral witnesses. Raker chain injuries, dehydration, and unlawful confinement." He dropped the forged scroll on the table. "Then decide if you want this read aloud in the courtyard." That landed. A murmur ran the arc of seats. Public scandal frightened councils more than blades. 2 guards approached Celeste from either side. Instinct told her to brace for another seizure, another pair of efficient hands reducing her to cargo. The soldier shifted one pace, enough to block them both. "Do not touch her, unless she consents," he said. Consent. In that room, from that mouth, the word felt almost unreal. Healer Tamsin arrived breathless with a satchel, and a glare sharp enough to cut leather. She took one look at Celeste's wrists and hissed through her teeth. "Who did this?" The braided counselor started to answer. Tamsin silenced her with a raised palm. "Not a legal question, a medical one." The soldier turned to Celeste, voice lowered so only she heard. "There is a room behind the old records vault. Quiet. Locked from inside. Will you come there with me and Tamsin, or stay in open chamber under watch?" He could have decided for her. The room expected him to. Instead, he waited, broad and dangerous and impossibly patient, as if her answer carried equal weight to his own. "I choose the quiet room," she said. He nodded once. "Your choice stands." The chamber erupted in objections, jurisdiction, procedure, tradition. He ignored all of it, collected the dangling chain so it would not strike her legs, and walked with her through a side passage of narrow stone and dim lamps where the noise blurred into distance. The hidden healer chamber had once been a storage crypt. Shelves now held folded linens, dried herbs, and jars labeled in Tamsin's severe hand. A single brazier warmed the room. Marcus closed the door and slid the inner bolt. Tamsin set down her satchel, checked Celeste's pulse, checked the child's rhythm with two cool fingers and a listening cone, and gave a short grunt that sounded like approval. Alive. Stubborn. Both of you. She looked up at the soldier. Heat water. Clean basin. He obeyed without a flicker of pride or offense. When Tamsin departed to gather salve, the chamber went quiet except for the small breath of coals. Celeste sat on the edge of a cot, palms flat on rough wool. He knelt before her with a basin between his knees and broke the cufflink with a twist of his hands that should not have been physically possible. Metal clinked to stone. He did not touch her skin until he asked, "May I?" She swallowed. "For what?" "To clean the cuts. Nothing else." A memory flashed bright and jagged. Men in North Hollow smiling while they tied her down. She hated that the memory still had power. Hated more that this man noticed and waited anyway. "You may clean them," she said. He dipped a cloth, then paused and spread his fingers over the water. Heat rolled from his palm. Steam curled up in thin ribbons until the basin held warmth instead of winter cold. Her surprise escaped before she could mask it. "You can do that?" "A little." The corner of his mouth moved, almost a smile, gone in an instant. "Useful on border watches." He cleaned each abrasion as if the work required ceremony, slow enough that she could pull back if she wanted. "This will sting." A beat later. "Pressure here." Another beat. "Tell me if it is too much." His voice stayed low, controlled, but tension threaded through every line of him. His wolf was close to the surface. She felt it in the air, in the way his shoulders held ready for impact that might come through the door. A shout sounded far down the corridor. Then boots. Celeste's breath shortened before reason could intervene. He heard it, set the cloth aside, and shifted so his body sat between her and the door while keeping his hands visible. "No one enters unless you approve," he said. "No one cages you again. Not while I stand." The promise was simple. It struck deeper than dramatic vows could have. Inside her, thoughts came hard and immediate, as if spoken against her ear. This is the dangerous part. This is where relief imitates safety. Do not confuse kindness with permanence. Do not give him the parts of you that still belong to grief. And yet he asks before he touches. He listens when I choose. He does not use my weakness as leverage. I am so tired of being measured for usefulness, for purity, for obedience. I want 1 hour where I am treated like a person and not a prophecy. She exhaled slowly and let her shoulders drop. When he finished bandaging her wrists, he noticed the folded scrap half hidden in her cloak pocket. "May I?" She hesitated, then handed it over. A baby blanket no bigger than 2 joined hands, pale wool now torn at one corner, embroidered with crooked frost leaf patterns Rowan had laughed over while pretending to critique her stitches. "It ripped at the marsh crossing," she said. "I did not have thread." Marcus lifted the blanket as if it might bruise. "I have thread." His stitching was clumsy, too tight in one place, too loose in another, but careful in the way that mattered. Each pass deliberate, each knot checked twice. He bent over the work with the concentration of a warrior disarming a trap. "I have mended armor, tents, and field packs," he said without looking up. "Never this. Never anything that mattered more than war." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "Why are you doing this?" He tied off the last knot and placed the blanket in her hands. "Because someone should have done it sooner." By the time the second afternoon bell rolled across the compound, the chamber door shook with a formal summons, and the council demanded a challenge hearing in the old assembly hall. The hall was built for hierarchy and intimidation. High rafters, torch brackets, a central stone table worn smooth by generations of verdicts. Celeste stood at one end with Tamsin near her shoulder, and two legal witnesses beside the pillar. Marcus stood behind the claimant line in plain soldier gray, expression unreadable, as though he had never torn a floor apart or warmed water with his bare hand. An elder read the motion in a voice built for public punishment. For pack safety, pending verification of bloodline status, the claimant Celeste Frostborn will submit to scent-proofing chains and restricted movement until winter convocation. Metal was brought out. Not old rust this time, but polished restraint links lined with runes. The hall watched her the way people watched storms, wary, fascinated, hoping for distance. Celeste lifted her chin. I claim sanctuary, not surrender. I refuse chains. The elder did not blink. Refusal invokes coercive compliance under internal threat statute. Marcus stepped forward before anyone else could breathe. Invoke it on me. The hall shifted as if struck by a wave. The elder frowned. You are not party. I am sponsor and guarantor for her conduct under Moon Code, Clause 11. The legal witness checked a ledger, startled. He filed it an hour ago. Proper mark and blood sign. Celeste turned sharply. He had bound himself to her case without telling her, accepting legal burden, debt penalties, combat liability. A move with non-trivial consequences for rank and future. The elder's voice hardened. Then, the disciplinary lashes transferred to the guarantor for each act of refusal. Marcus removed his outer jacket, folded it once, and set it on the table. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at Celeste. You do not owe me agreement, he said quietly. You owe yourself choice. She wanted to stop him. She wanted to demand why he kept paying in flesh for a woman he had met in a cellar pit. The words did not come in time. The whip cracked once, twice, 3 times across his back, each strike sharp as split timber in the vaulted room. He did not cry out. On the 4th, his fingers tightened around the table edge hard enough for stone grit to break loose. Tamsin muttered a curse under her breath. Celeste felt fury rise like flame, clean and cold. This is not safety, she said to the elders. This is spectacle. A younger guard assigned to chain duty stepped toward her with forced neutrality and reached out, palm flattening toward the curve of her belly. Protocol verification for prophecy mark. Marcus moved. One moment he was braced at the table, blood-darkening torn fabric. The next he had crossed the distance and slammed the guard face first to stone, forearm locked across the man's shoulders, claws just visible where nails should have been. Benches screeched. Half the hall surged to its feet. Then his control snapped wider, and the hall drowned in alpha pressure so immense it buckled knees. Air thickened. Torches guttered sideways. Elders who had ruled for decades dropped to one knee with shocked expressions, hands shaking against polished stone. Even the lashmaster staggered back, whip lowered, breath ragged. Marcus's eyes burned amber so bright they looked lit from within. His voice carried without shouting. No hand touches her body without her spoken consent. Silence answered him, stunned and absolute. The pinned guard gasped. Alpha? Marcus pressed him harder to the table, then released all at once and stepped back, control returning in measured layers. You will apologize. The guard stayed bent, palms spread. I apologize. To her, Marcus said. The guard turned, face drained of color. Claimant Frostborn, I apologize. Celeste held his gaze until he looked away. Accepted. Do not repeat it. No elder challenged her right to answer. The white-haired senior elder rose slowly, breathing through humiliation and calculation. This hearing is suspended pending royal review. Royal review. The phrase rippled through the hall with a dozen implications. Marcus said nothing to confirm or deny them. He picked up his folded jacket with deliberate calm and turned toward Celeste as if the room had ceased to exist. For the first time since North Hollow burned itself into a grave in her memory, she stepped toward a man in power because she wanted to, not because she was cornered. Her hand lifted, hovered, then settled lightly against his wrist where pulse beat strong under skin. "I am still angry," she said, voice low enough for only him to hear. "At fate, at timing, at all of this." A rough breath left him, almost a laugh, almost pain. "So am I. But I believe you when you say no more cages." His shoulders eased by a fraction, that small release more intimate than any embrace. "Then we begin there," he said. She did not take her hand away. She did not take her hand away, and the hall noticed. A narrow silence formed around them, while elders pretended to study ledgers and guards pretended to adjust straps that did not need adjusting. Then the chamber doors opened again, and a courier in winter black crossed the threshold without waiting for permission, his hood damp from mist, his gloves white with road salt. "Sealed notice from Wulfric Ravencrest to the Ashford Council," he said, "to be read aloud before witnesses." No one invited him closer. He came anyway, laid a lacquered tube on the stone table and stepped back with the rigid posture of a zealot expecting applause. Marcus reached the tube first. He broke the seal, scanned the first page, then handed it to Celeste without comment. She read while the room watched her face. The script was formal convocation hand, each line measured and cold. By decree of sanctified necessity, claimant Celeste Frostborn is to be transferred under Ashen Vale custody for purification before first snow. Supporting testimony enclosed. Declaration by Rowan Frostborn, acknowledging unstable queen line blood and consenting to corrective rite. The second sheet carried Rowan's name, Rowan's mark, Rowan's rhythm of phrasing in 3 places and nowhere else. The forger had copied his hand but not his heart. Her breath snagged. Not because she believed it, because she could hear the deliberate cruelty in the construction, the way it targeted memory itself. If she defended Rowan, she looked emotional and unreliable. If she ignored it, silence could be framed as acceptance. Marcus's voice cut through before she could speak. "This testimony is fabricated. Ink age is wrong, wax impression is recast, and the witness stamp belongs to an elder who died last spring." The courier smiled with practiced pity. "Your soldier speaks above his station." "He speaks with mine," came a new voice from the high seat. Every head turned. The white-haired senior elder had risen, but he was not looking at Marcus. He was looking at the wall behind him, at the carved ash tree that marked sovereign authority in Ashford law. The implication settled across the chamber like thunder rolling in. The courier recovered fast. "Then your station will understand consequences. Refuse transfer and Ravencrest files, charges of blight harboring, prophetic sedition, and ritual obstruction against this pack. Trade roads close by dawn. Border pacts dissolve by week's end." Celeste folded the forged testimony once, twice, and placed it flat on the table. "Tell Wulfric he does not get to put words in my dead mate's mouth." The courier's eyes sharpened. "Wulfric does not negotiate with vessels." Marcus moved so quickly the room barely tracked it. One hand braced on the table. He leaned in until the courier had nowhere to look but his face. "Use that word for her again and you leave without teeth." The courier flinched despite himself. Power rolled off Marcus in a controlled wave, enough to force truth through fear without breaking law. "Who wrote the confession?" "I carry messages," the courier said through clenched jaw. "I do not read prayers." Marcus pressed harder. "Who wrote it?" "Elder Varick of North Hollow drafted. Wulfric approved. 3 copies sent. 1 to you. 1 to Eastern Councils. 1 to the Convocation Archive." That admission changed the room. Not outrage first. Calculation. The elders knew what archive placement meant. If planted early, a lie could become precedent before anyone challenged it. Marcus released him. "You will remain under guard." I am protected by messenger accord. Not when you deliver forged testimony designed to trigger interpack war. The courier opened his mouth, closed it, and chose silence. 2 Ashford sentries escorted him out. When the doors shut, the senior elder looked at Celeste with something like shame worn over old caution. If this reaches convocation uncontested, Ravencrest can petition ceremonial custody before any defense is heard. He wants her at the altar, Marcus said, publicly chained, publicly condemned. Then he names us collaborators for resisting his correction rites. Tamsin's expression hardened. He kills her and calls it doctrine. Celeste stood very still while their words arranged themselves into a shape she had feared but not fully named. It was never only about her blood. Wulfric wanted theater. He wanted a corpse, a doctrine, and a war he could sanctify from a safe distance. Marcus turned toward the council table. Seal every outgoing record room. Send copies of this forgery to allied packs with a request for independent ink dating. I want legal review from 3 external houses before sunset. The senior elder hesitated. That is a royal protocol order. Marcus met his gaze, then treated it as one. By the time the sun slid lower behind the western wall, Ashford had split cleanly into camps that no longer bothered to hide themselves. In the lower yard, older soldiers tightened gate rotations and checked armory locks in silence. In the upper galleries, council aides whispered over copied documents, comparing seal ridges by lamplight. In kitchen corridors, apprentices repeated the same rumor in 6 different versions, each one ending with Celeste as contagion or catalyst. In the healer chamber, Tamsin set out salves for Marcus's back and left with a pointed look that said, "Both behave and do not bleed on my floor." The door closed. Quiet settled. Marcus sat on a low stool with his shirt folded beside him, lash marks crossing broad muscle in red-black lines that made Celeste's stomach knot. He did not ask for help. He only passed her the salve jar and waited. She dipped her fingers and touched the first welt. He inhaled sharply but stayed still. "Too much pressure?" she asked. "Not from you." The answer landed between them, intimate and dangerous. She worked in slow strokes, tracing heat into damaged skin while the bond thrummed. Not frantic now, steadier, like 2 drums finding one cadence in the dark. She hated that comfort could coexist with grief, hated that her body recognized him as shelter, while another part of her still turned toward Rowan's memory like a hand toward old flame. Inside her, thought moved in a raw, present tense current. I am not faithless for surviving. I am not disloyal for feeling this. Love does not erase what came before, but fear can erase what comes next if I let it. He keeps asking, keeps waiting, keeps giving me choices in rooms built to strip them away. If I step closer, I might lose him. If I step back, I lose myself. She spread salve over the last mark and wiped her hands on linen. You should be resting, not drafting legal challenges. So should you. I sleep when I can stop hearing chains. His shoulders tightened at that, then eased. He rose, turned, and faced her fully, close enough that she felt his breath warm her temple. I sent 3 external contacts an hour ago, he said. 1 to Eastern legal houses with seal rubbings, 1 to North Hollow archives asking for Rowan's authenticated hand samples, 1 to Border Command with names from the courier. Outcomes? The first writer returned already. Eastern houses accepted review and froze immediate transfer claims until they publish findings. A faint edge of relief crossed his face. The second returned with a burned satchel and 1 page intact. Varric's clerk ledger. Payment columns tied to Ravencrest granaries. His voice dropped. The third rider did not come back before dusk. Celeste absorbed that in silence. 1 contact confirmed, 1 partially confirmed, 1 missing. No room left for optimism masquerading as strategy. Outside, bells marked evening watch. Torches bloomed along the courtyard wall, light shaking in the wind. Marcus took her wrist carefully, thumb brushing the bandage. There is one more detail, distinctive and wrong. The courier's gloves were dusted with consecrated salt mixed with ground ash leaf. Ritual medium, she said, used to suppress scent trails and disrupt ward lines. He nodded. Why would a messenger carry enough to breach inner wards unless someone planned to use it tonight? A hard knock struck the chamber door. 3 quick taps. Pause. 2 taps. Ashford's signal for internal guard. Marcus opened. Captain Brand stood there, face set. South Archive Ward failed, Brand said. Not from impact, from inside. We found salt lines under the threshold and 2 council scribes unconscious. Also, the detained courier is gone. Marcus cursed under his breath and reached for his shirt. Lock down all interior stairwells. Already ordered. There is more. Bran glanced once at Celeste, then back. A truce party waits at the outer gate. Wulfric Ravencrest in person, requesting entry under convocation pre-audit rights. Celeste felt cold run straight through her despite the brazier heat. Marcus's gaze went feral for a heartbeat, then sharpened into command. He stays outside. Bran did not move. Council is split. 3 elders argue he must be received to avoid diplomatic breach. Diplomatic breach is preferable to ritual abduction. I agree, Bran said. They are voting anyway. Marcus grabbed his jacket and turned to Celeste. You come with me. No, she said, surprising them both with the steel in her tone. If he wants theater, he wants me visible. I will not stand in that courtyard while he performs innocence. Before Marcus could answer, another tremor moved through the floor, subtle but unmistakable, like a heavy gate dropping into place below them. Bran's head snapped toward the corridor. That came from understructure. The old cells, Celeste thought immediately. The pit. The tunnels no one used because everyone preferred to forget they existed. A horn blasted once from the lower yard, then choked off mid-note. Marcus was already moving. Bran, seal upper halls and pull non-combatants to West Wing. Tamsin gets priority escort. Bran sprinted. Marcus caught Celeste's shoulders, eyes locked on hers. I need you in the vault room, bolted inside, now. No. Celeste, you said choice. Her pulse pounded so hard she heard it. If they came through the cells, they came for me specifically. Hiding me blind while you fight shadows is how people disappear. His jaw clenched. Every protective instinct in him fought the logic and knew it was sound. A second horn call tore through the Packhouse, this one from inside the building, answered by shouting and the ring of steel on stone. Then a voice echoed down the corridor, amplified by tunnel acoustics and fanatical certainty. By sanctified writ of the Ashen Veil, surrender the vessel and be absolved. Marcus bared his teeth. They are in the walls. Smoke slid under the healer chamber door, pale gray and bitter with ash leaf. Not fire smoke, suppression powder. Celeste yanked a wet cloth from the basin and tied it over her nose, then pressed another into Marcus's hand. Lower passage, she said through fabric. If they are driving us from air, they want us funneled. He nodded once. Stay on my left. Do not break line. They stepped into the corridor together as lamps flickered and alarms collided. And at the far bend, where the floor sloped toward the old punishment cells, figures in white-edged black advanced through the haze with hooked manacle poles and consecrated chains already swinging. Steel rang at the bend as the first Veil enforcer lunged through smoke, chain pole arcing for Celeste's throat. Marcus caught the shaft in both hands and twisted. Wood split, iron hook skidding sparks across stone. A second attacker came low with manacles open, trying to trap Celeste's ankles. She kicked hard, heel connecting with wrist, and the chain snapped shut on empty air. The corridor had become a funnel of bodies and shouted orders. Ashford guards poured in from the stairwell behind them. Bran at the front with a short blade and a torn sleeve, while Vale zealots advanced from the understructure slope in white-edged black, faces veiled, movements drilled and precise. They did not fight like raiders. They fought like men who believed ritual protected them from consequence. "Hold the upper line," Bran shouted. "Do not let them seal the doors." One zealot slammed a clay canister at their feet. It burst in a cloud of bitter powder. Celeste's eyes watered instantly. The wet cloth over her mouth helped, but not enough to keep the sting from her lungs. Marcus shifted in front of her, one arm sweeping back to keep her tight to his left side as he drove forward with brutal efficiency, shoulder, elbow, open hand strikes that broke formations instead of bones. From deeper below, Wulfric's voice rolled upward, amplified by stone and certainty. "Ashford stands at a sacred crossroads. Surrender the corrupt bloodline and be cleansed of complicity." "Keep talking," Marcus called back, feral calm under the words. "It helps me find you." A zealot with a wolf-bone pendant pointed at Celeste and barked, "Take the vessel alive." 3 chains flew at once. Marcus swatted 2 aside, but the third snagged Celeste's bandaged wrist and cinched tight. The yank dragged her 2 steps down the sloped passage. She slammed into the wall, pain flaring up her arm. Marcus roared, a sound too deep for human throat, and surged after her. Salt lines ignited across the floor between them, white fire snapping up in a half-circle. He hit it anyway and staggered, aura colliding with consecrated wards in a shower of bright cracks. The zealots used the opening. 2 poles crossed against his chest, forcing him back 1 pace then another, while 4 more pulled Celeste downhill through smoke. "Marcus!" she shouted. His eyes locked on hers through the haze, amber bled bright in his irises, and command thundered off him hard enough to shake dust from the rafters. 2 zealots dropped to a knee. The rest gritted through it, chanting under their breath as they dragged her toward the old cells. By the time the 3rd alarm bell hammered through the packhouse, Celeste was hauled through a low arch into a chamber she recognized from stories and never expected to see. The original punishment vault, older than the current cells, carved in black stone, its floor engraved with concentric rings around an obsidian pillar scarred by age. Torchlight shuddered across salt sigils freshly painted into grooves. Wulfric Ravencrest stood at the far side in ceremonial black, silver prayer chains wound around his forearms, pale hair tied back from a narrow, composed face. Elder Varric was beside him, jaw tight, eyes refusing to meet hers. 3 Ashford counselors stood behind them in formal gray, hands stained with chalk and salt. The betrayal hurt less than she expected. She had run out of surprise. "Welcome, Celeste," Wulfric said, as if greeting her to supper. "You choose chaos wherever you go." "I did not choose you," she said, breath rough. "No. You chose defiance. Same outcome." His gaze dropped to the curve of her belly and lifted again with clinical disdain. "History keeps handing women accidents and calling them destiny." The chains wrenched her arms wide and locked to iron rings mounted on the pillar. Cold metal bit skin. The ritual circle hummed faintly under her boots. Marcus crashed into the archway above with Bran and 6 guards at his back. He hit the ward line first, fists and aura battering against white flame. Bran tried the side ledge and got thrown by a second glyph, rolling hard and coming up swearing. Wulfric did not turn. Alpha power is loud and simple. Wards are quiet and exact. He cannot cross until the circle closes. Marcus's voice shook the chamber. "Celeste, keep your eyes on me." She did. His control was all that held the room from becoming slaughter. Claws had started to edge from his hands. He forced them back, then failed, then forced them again. Every breath looked like work. Varric stepped forward with a parchment. "By testimony of Rowan Frostborn, submitted under witness—" "Lie," Celeste snapped. Varric flinched as if struck. Wulfric lifted one hand and the chanters began. Low, rhythmic, ugly in its certainty. Heat rose from the carved rings. Not fire yet, only warning. The crux landed in her all at once. If she waited for Marcus to break the ward, Wulfric controlled the timing, the script, the spectacle. If she acted inside the circle, she might tear the ritual open from its core, but only if she trusted what she had spent months denying. Frostborn line magic. Not curse, inheritance. Inside her mind, fear and grief fought for ground. Rowan, I loved you. I love you still. But love is not a grave I climb into to make men comfortable. She inhaled once, steadying. Then she spoke clearly, voice carrying over chant and crackling wards. Rowan Frostborn died defending my right to choose. I will not let his name be used to chain me. Wulfric's smile thinned. Chain her mouth. A zealot reached for her. Celeste drove her head forward and slammed her brow into his nose. He reeled back with a cry, hands to his face. She did not wait. She twisted her cuffed wrists, ignoring the scrape of iron, and struck both chains against the obsidian pillar as hard as she could. Once, twice, nothing. The third strike split skin across her knuckles. Blood smeared the old stone. The pillar answered. Frost-bright lines flared beneath centuries of grime, runes rising like moonlight through deep water, threading out from the blood mark in branching paths across the carved rings. The chant faltered. Wulfric's composure cracked for the first time. No, he said sharply. Those marks were dead. They were hidden, Celeste said, and hit the pillar again, feeding it another streak of red. Not dead. Silver-white light raced through the chamber floor, overriding the salt sigils one by one. The temperature dropped so fast torch flames bent inward. Somewhere above, glass shattered. Marcus hit the ward at that exact instant. This time the white line flickered, destabilized by the runes, and he drove through with a snarl, partial wolf surfacing in a rush. Fangs bared, claws out, gaze ancient and furious. Bran and the guards surged after him. Wulfric raised both arms and the ritual fire snapped up from the outer ring, a wall of pale flame meant to pen Celeste in. She planted her feet, belly forward, shoulders squared, and shouted over the roar. Do not shield me, Marcus. This ends by my will. He halted on the inner edge, chest heaving, every instinct in him straining toward her. Then he obeyed. He held the line against incoming zealots instead, carving space with controlled violence while Bran's guards disarmed and pinned. Celeste turned both palms toward the pillar. The runes answered with a flood of silver that wrapped her wrists like living thread, then shot outward into the circle. She pushed, not with muscle but with intent honed to one clean point. Invert. The ritual reversed. Fire that had leaned toward her folded inward on its casters. Not burning flesh, but stripping glyphs, snapping chain prayers, ripping sanctified authority off the men who had wielded it. Zealots dropped their poles and clutched at their chests as their bonded marks dimmed to ash gray. Varric collapsed to both knees, gagging, his voice gone to a rasp. Wulfric snarled and drew a consecrated blade from his sleeve, thin as a vow and bright with etched scripture. He lunged through the failing ring straight for Celeste. Marcus moved with him, but Celeste moved first. She caught Wulfric's wrist in both hands. The impact jarred her shoulders. He drove forward, teeth bared, trying to force the blade down. Silver light poured up her arms, rune-bright and steady. His eyes widened. You are a vessel, not a queen, he spat. Celeste met his stare, grip tightening until the tendons in his wrist trembled. I was never your vessel. She released the pulse. The blade shattered into glittering dust that spun once in the air and vanished. Wulfric cried out, more shock than pain. Marcus hit him from the side in partial wolf form and slammed him to the stones, forearm across his collarbones, claws at his throat without breaking skin. Your judgment, Marcus said, voice raw. He did not look away from Wulfric, but the words were for Celeste alone. She stepped down from the pillar, chains falling from her wrists as the runes unlocked. The chamber had gone eerily quiet except for ragged breathing and the clatter of dropped restraints. She stood over Wulfric, lifted her right hand where silver still burned along her palm, and pressed it flat to his chest. He tried to snarl another prayer. No sound came. By witness of Pack and Moon, Celeste said, each word precise, I sever every stolen bond you hold through coercion, forgery, and ritual abuse. You keep your life. You lose your claim. Light sank into him like a seal pressed into wax. His aura collapsed. The pressure he had carried like a cloak winked out. Around the chamber, zealots felt it and froze, faces draining as their chosen purifier became only a man pinned on cold stone, shaking. Bran stepped forward first. By Ashford law and allied code, Wulfric Ravencrest is confined pending convocation trial. All Vale operatives disarm now. One by one, weapons hit the floor. At the archway, a mud-streaked rider stumbled in under guard, chest heaving, cloak torn at the shoulder. Marcus glanced up, recognition flashing. The missing third contact. The rider saluted with a shaking hand. Border Command received your report. Reinforcements at the East Gate. I brought witness writs and chain of custody seals. Eastern legal houses have logged the forgery and the ledger under public review. Thread by thread, the trap finished unraveling. Marcus hauled Wulfric upright and shoved him toward Bran's waiting irons. No private cells, he said. Transparent confinement, rotating witnesses. Celeste looked at Varric, still kneeling, voice stripped and eyes wet with something too late to matter. She felt no triumph, only a hard, clean absence where fear had lived. The runes dimmed, smoke thinned. Above them, boots thundered as Ashford secured the last corridors. Marcus came to her then, stopping one breath away, blood at his knuckles, torn shirt hanging open, gaze searching her face for permission even now. She nodded once. He touched her wrist gently, right over the raw marks where iron had sat, and the bond settled into a steadier cadence between them as Bran led Wulfric away in chains that no prayer could bless. He did not let anyone steer her away from the understructure until she said she was ready. Tamsin checked her wrists, checked the child again, then pointed at Marcus's split knuckles and told him to sit before she knocked him down herself. Bran posted double guards at every stairwell and read the confinement order for Wulfric in a voice built to carry through stone. The surviving zealots were searched, disarmed, and separated under rotating watch exactly as Marcus ordered, and the escaped courier was identified among them when the wolf bone pendant dropped from his sleeve and matched Bran's evidence log from the archive breach. Only after every corridor call came back answered did Celeste lift her chin toward the broken section of the old Packhouse floor. Take me there, she said. Dusk had settled by the time they climbed to the side corridor where she had first been chained. The stacked wood was gone. The trapdoor had been ripped free. Above the opening, jagged boards framed a square of deepening indigo sky. Cool air slid down through the beams and brought the scent of rain and pine, clean enough to sting. Marcus stood a few steps away from her in the wreckage, shirt changed but still open at the throat. The restraint he carried in public finally frayed at the edges. His gaze tracked every breath she took, every small shift of her shoulders, as if he expected her to vanish if he blinked. She reached for him first. His hands closed around hers, careful around bandages, and the bond tightened with a low, full warmth that moved through her ribs and settled low over the life inside her. Grief did not disappear. It made room. That was the miracle and the terror of it. I need words, he said hoarsely. Not silence, I guess at. If you want distance, I give it. If you want time, I give it. If you want me near, say it and I stay. I want you near, she answered. I want this chosen, not taken. He bowed his head once, then did something no ruler had ever done for her in any hall of law. He bared his throat and held still, offering the most vulnerable line of his body to her without demand, without performance. Celeste Frostborn, he said, voice rough with reverence, I ask consent to claim you as my mate. Her chest tightened so hard she almost laughed at the audacity of hope returning yet again, blade and blessing both. She lifted her hand to his jaw, felt the faint scrape of stubble against her palm, and nodded. Yes. The word changed the air between them. He stepped in slowly, giving her every chance to stop him, one hand braced at her waist, the other cradling the back of her neck. When his mouth touched the junction of her neck and shoulder first, it was a kiss, not a bite, warm and unhurried. Then his fangs pierced skin in a clean, sharp pull that made her gasp. Pain flashed bright. Then it opened. Heat unfurled from the mark in widening waves, not erasing hurt but transmuting it into something fierce and luminous, a current that ran through old fear, through buried loneliness, through the scarred place where Rowan's death still echoed, and knit none of it into forgetting. She felt Marcus through the bond as clearly as her own pulse, his devotion like iron, his restraint like a held storm, his wonder raw and almost disbelieving. She felt the animal in him settle, not conquered, simply home. He drew back with blood on his lower lip, pupils wide, breath unsteady. Mine, he whispered, as if the word were a prayer he was afraid to break. She caught his face in both hands, smiling through tears she did not hide. Yours, she said, and then, with deliberate clarity, mate. His shuddering exhale answered like a vow. She did not wait for him to ask the second time. She slid one hand to the nape of his neck and guided him down until his throat was within reach, then bared her own teeth and bit. Her fangs broke skin over his pulse. He made a strained sound that was half pain, half relief, so deep it shook him. Power answered power. Gold and silver filaments flared across the bond in visible threads for one suspended heartbeat, curling from his mark to hers and back again, bright against the dim corridor. The thrum that had lived between them since the cell clicked into a steady shared cadence. His hands tightened at her back. Her knees went weak. He held her upright without making her small. When she released him, a line of blood traced his throat and disappeared beneath the collar of his shirt. He rested his forehead against hers, both of them breathing like they had run a great distance and finally reached water. Mine, she said this time, tasting salt and iron and rain in the air. Yours, he answered immediately. Mate. They stayed like that, wrapped around each other under the broken floor where she had once counted breaths to keep from breaking, until the old terror in her body began to loosen for good. She touched the splintered edge of the opening and gave him a wet, crooked smile. You tore up an entire floor to meet me. He huffed a short laugh against her temple. Not my most subtle entrance. Effective, though. Noted for future diplomacy. By dawn the next morning, the full assembly had filled the great hall. Allied observers stood along the outer arc with legal tablets open. Bran delivered chain of custody logs for the forged scroll, the recast black wax, the salt ash leaf mixture, and the payment ledger recovered from Varric's clerk satchel. The mud-streaked writer who had returned during the battle read the border report aloud under oath, and the Eastern legal house's sealed findings were opened in public. The confession in Rowan's name was fraudulent, the witness stamp copied from a dead elder, the archive insertion coordinated. The braided counselor, pale but steady, stepped forward when called. She admitted she had signed emergency intake under coercive threat to her son's trade caravan and had delayed transfer orders where she could, though never enough. She did not ask forgiveness. She asked for sentence and accepted censure, restitution, and removal from judicial vote for 1 year. Varric confessed to drafting the false testimony in exchange for grain guarantees from Ravencrest and lost his rank, lands, and speaking rights at convocation. Wulfric, still voiceless from Celeste's judgment, stood in transparent confinement before witnesses from 6 packs while his cult network was dismantled cell by cell under shared jurisdiction. Then Marcus crossed to the sovereign mark, shed the last pretense of soldier anonymity, and claimed his station in full. "I am Marcus Ashford," he said, carrying to every beam in the hall, Alpha King by blood, by trial, and by the consent of the allied packs. "I concealed my crown while internal corruption was traced. That concealment ends now." He turned to Celeste and held out his hand. She walked to him as an equal, not a rescued prisoner, and he spoke the words that redrew law in front of every witness. Celeste Frostborn ended the Ashen Veil's right with her own will, preserved allied peace, and exposed the fraud used to weaponize prophecy bloodlines. "I name her High Luna Regent of the United Territories, with full cosign authority over sanctuary, succession, and tribunal reform." The hall bowed. Not all at once, but all. By the second week of spring, workers had dismantled the old punishment cells down to foundation stone. Celeste kept one wall intact, the carved line she had read in darkness. "They believe the lie if enough men repeat it." Beneath it, she ordered a second inscription in new stone, "Names restored in truth." The chamber became a healing archive where testimony from the silenced was recorded, witnessed, and sealed beyond tampering. On the night of first full moon after thaw, torches ringed the ancient stone circle above Ashford Valley. Allied packs gathered in formal colors. Tamsin stood at Celeste's side with unapologetic pride. Bran kept watch at the perimeter, relaxed for once. The young gate guard who had first read the forged order carried the sanctuary charter forward with both hands and did not tremble. Celeste wore silver woven with frost leaf thread. Marcus wore dark ceremonial leather and no crown until she placed one half of the paired circlet on his head and he placed the other on hers. Their daughter slept between them in a fur-lined sling, tiny fist curled against Celeste's chest, breathing evenly beneath moonlight. They spoke vows without flourish, clear enough for every witness. "No more cages," Marcus said. "No more running," Celeste answered. "Only us," they said together, and sealed it with joined hands over their child. The valley wind moved through the pines like a long exhale. No chants, no chains. Just wolves, moonlight, law remade, and a kingdom beginning again with tenderness hard-won and fiercely kept.